It's okay, Don. That happens with age sometimes. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And welcome to Cornerstone Baptist Church in Salem, Oregon, as we have our first service of the day, which is a Torah Parashah. And we do have a second one in about an hour and 15 minutes. I highly encourage you to join that. It's our main worship service. Fantastic music, and we have a great sermon that's going to be spoken today. Today's Torah Parashah is number 53. We're getting so close to the end. And this Ha'azinu, which is give ear, is one of the English translations. Sometimes these vary slightly, but they usually have the same meaning. So this one is give ear, and which is why I have all three of those images up there. You have the whole Israel giving ear to Yahweh, who is the column of fire. You have Moshe listening here and writing down and listening. An encouragement to us to do the same thing. All right. And now if you're able to, physically, if you could rise for the blessing before the reading of the Torah. Baruch et Yahweh Hamivarak. Baruch Yahweh Hamivarak Le'elam Vaher. Baruch Yahweh Hamivarak Le'elam Vaher. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher bakar banu mikol ha'amin venatan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Yahweh, Baruch Shemo, Noten HaTorah. Amen. And then together in English. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. Okay. Now, today's reading is a little longer, so if you have plenty of robust diaphragm and can push out okay, it's chapter 32, verses 1 through 47. It's the Song of Moshe, so I wanted to include the whole thing in. There's a couple of tricky words, so be ready for that as well. Do we have a volunteer? We have a volunteer in the back. All right.
Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak. And hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain. My speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of Yahweh. Ascribe ye greatness unto our Elohim. He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment. An Elohim of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Do ye thus requite Yahweh, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that hath bought thee? Hath he not made thee and established thee? Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For Yahweh's portion is his people. Yaakov is the lot of his inheritance. He found him in a desert land, and in the waste, howling wilderness. He led him about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings. So Yahweh alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. He made him ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields. And he made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine, and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat. And thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxen fat, thou art grown thick, thou art covered with fatness. Then he forsook Elohim, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods, with abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to Elohim, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begot thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten Elohim that formed thee. And when Yahweh saw it, he abhorred them, because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see that their end shall be. For they are very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not Elohim. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation, for a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will heap mischiefs upon them, I will spend mine arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger, and devoured with burning heat, and with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, with the poison of serpents of the dust. The sword without, the terror within, shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs. I said, I would scatter them into corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among them. Were it not that I feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, and lest they should say, Our hand is high, and Yahweh hath not done all this. For they are a nation void of counsel, neither is there any understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. How should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them, and Yahweh had shut them up? For their rock is not our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall, their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons, and the cruel venom of asps. Is not this laid up in store with me, and sealed up among my treasures? To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall not slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. For Yahweh shall judge his people, and repent himself for his servants, when he seeth that their power is gone, and there is none shut up or left. And he shall say, Where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted, which did eat the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings? Let them rise up and help you and be your protection. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. For I lift up my hand to heaven and say, I live forever. If I whet my glittering sword, and mine hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies, and will reward them that hate me. I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and that with the blood of the slain and of the captives, from the beginning of revenges upon the enemy. Rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance to his adversaries, and will be merciful unto his land and to his people. And Moshe came and spake all the words of this song in the ears of the people, he and Hoshea the son of Nun. And Moshe made an end of speaking all these words to all Israel. And he said unto them, set your hearts unto all the words which I testify among you this day, which ye shall command your children to observe to do, all the words of this Torah. For it is not a vain thing for you, because it is your life. And through this thing ye shall prolong your days in the land, whither ye go over Jordan to possess it.
Amen. Thank you. And now a blessing after the reading of the Torah. Baruch atah Yahweh, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betakenu. Baruch atah Yahweh, Baruch Shemo, Noten HaTorah. Amen. And together in English. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. Amen. Thank you, everyone. You can go ahead and be seated. There we go. And today, as usual, we have a really, really neat Torah Parashah section. And we also have the Haftarah and the Gospel too. Now, the one in Devarim is very, very simple. We have the Song of Moshe, which Kevin read, and then we have a tail end of that as Moshe's death is foretold. So it's a shorter Torah section this time. And the Haftarah, which goes along with it, we have three from three different books. It's amazing. In Hosea, we have a plea to return to Yahweh. In Micah, we have God's steadfast love and compassion. In Joel, we have return to Yahweh and Yahweh had pity. And this is all kind of cinched up really, I think, nicely with this week's Gospel Parashah, which is in Matthew. And it's the parable of the unforgiving servant. It's one of those stories where I'm glad I can learn from someone else's mistake instead of doing the mistake. It is a great story, and I really hope we can get into that today during the Parashah session. Now, all during today's Torah Parashah discussions, please consider where is Yeshua, and how is this relevant to us today? Okay? And I was able to get out the worksheet on Wednesday. That is also proofread by someone else too, but I will take credit for any typos or errors in there. Two of us go over that, make sure a lot of detail. Stuff like that. But the questions are emailed out early, so in case you wish to have time to contemplate them or even go back to them later on, you can download that Microsoft Word file and discuss those. So I'll open it up to anybody who has a discussion or answer any of the questions really for today's Torah Parashah, the Haftarah, or the Gospel. Okay, we got two hands up there. We have one microphone runner. Unless, Craig, you want to do double duty there. No? Okay. Yeah, husband, go ahead.
So what we read there, this is Moshe, and as we can pretty much assume, this is before he entered the Holy Land, because he didn't enter. Everything that we're seeing here, before they go in, is a call for them to do the right thing. And an explanation of when you do the wrong thing, these are the things that are going to happen. And then when you do these wrong things, Yahweh's going to fix it, and this is how he's going to fix it. This is not something unique to Moshe. This is actually a very common pattern with Yahweh. When he admonishes us, when he tells us, hey, listen, you're going to fail, you're going to fall down, these things are going to happen, or you've done these things, there is this intentional route that he sets out many times saying, and this is how you retrieve your salvation. This is how you rescue yourself from the jaws of what you're creating. I've already lined it up for you. This goes all the way back. It's funny, we begin and end at the same places. Bereshit, First thing that happens in Genesis, they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Man separates themselves from Yahweh. What is the first thing he does? He makes a covenant with us based on himself, his promises to fix and rectify the situations. Adam and Eve weren't given all the details. Moshe was not given all the details. That's Yahweh's territory. So I think it's imperative for us when we read things like this to understand that even in the midst of our being punished, that's a blessing. It is only a curse if you're rebelling against Yahweh. If somebody the likes of Ahab can drop to his knees and find a measure of forgiveness, if somebody like David did some pretty questionable stuff, just saying, can fall to his knees. If somebody like Paul the Apostle can, his sacrifice is sufficient for me. I am guaranteed that if I can note those times when I'm being corrected, if I can learn enough about Yahweh's character to see where I have gone wrong, that there is that path forward. And I would encourage everybody, because this has been the most valuable thing for me, every time that things have been tough, every time that things have been rough, start asking, what have I done that my relationship with Yahweh, maybe at this point, maybe it's not something I've done, maybe it's something I've done, maybe it's something that I have brought about by my own hand in ignorance and I need to fix my knowledge. Maybe it's unintentional things. I don't know. But if I take it as a gift from Yahweh and I understand his patterns, good and bad, everything serves him. Even the bad in my life can serve him. I just need to find out what needs to be salvaged. And I think that's what Moshe is doing here. I think that's what happened at Genesis. Is it's constantly reestablishing that pattern of through those things that we would consider curses, we retrieve the blessings.
Yeah, amen to that. I was when Kevin was reading the Song of Moshe again, it was just like, oh, that's getting kind of, oh my goodness, it's getting warm in here. We are so seriously in trouble, because I identify with them. And yet, it ends with the good news. Yeah, I agree with you. The Lord does that. He really does. Yes, ma'am.
What really stands out in this Torah portion, I know every week it says, where is Yeshua in this parsha? I think of Yeshua as the rock, the solid rock that just stands out. And 2 Samuel 22:31 and Psalm 18:2. And his ways are perfect, unchanging. His instructions are rock solid. For a people who are fickle and unstable in their ways. And this is all about redemption. And so there was one verse, I couldn't find the address. I knew it was somewhere in Psalm. Is lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And I happened to look in the back. I got to look up this real quick. And it's Psalm 61:2. And it says, lead me to the rock that's higher than I, because his ways are higher than our ways. And so this Torah portion in chapter 32, it's a warning for us and a reminder that we need to come back to him and turn from our wicked ways. This is for our own good, for our redemption. Yahweh wants to have a close relationship with us and to bless us. And so a verse that I wrote down was that they sacrificed to devils, not to God. Gods they did not know. And to Yahweh belongeth vengeance and recompense. And reminds me of in the New Testament that vengeance is mine, I will repay. So he's not going to let people get away with sin and their evil and wicked ways, because that is something that is not tolerated, and it separates mankind from Yahweh. So their foot slid, their day of calamity, and he wounds and he makes alive. He reminds the people to set their hearts unto the words which he testifies to them, and to do all the words of the law, and not only doing it for themselves and their family and friends, but their children, and to teach it to their children diligently. So these are serious instructions from Yahweh. And so they should not bow down to other idols that are made of stone and rock or gold and silver, but that they should bow down to the true Creator. He is the one that is holy, and that we need to be submissive to him.
Yeah, this is a real, we got a hand in the back there too, Craig. Yeah, this is a very serious matter. This is really life and death, not just this life that we're in here, but our eternal life, the life after. This is very serious. So you have to really make sure that you pay attention to this one. Yeah, anybody who's a parent knows that when you were raising your children, there were some things that were important, but there were some things like, hey, you don't mess around with this one. You don't do this. You know, you had to do that sometimes and stuff. And the Lord does it with us. Yeah, Jill.
I read this one. This is like a favorite chapter of mine, over and over again. But something that Yahweh just pointed out to me this year is that it is a song. And if you look up in Revelation, the word is, you look up what the word actually means in Greek and in Hebrew, and it is song. And if you look through various cultures, songs are, like most cultures will have, a person will have kind of their own individual song that they sing to ourselves. We probably have it ourselves, those words that you repeat to yourself over and over again, like, Jill, you're doing it again, do this way, that kind of thing. And I can see this being Moshe's song. He's, in the sense of these are probably words that the people of Israel heard from him frequently. This isn't just a one-time thing. He was the judge for them, along with the other appointees that he did after his father-in-law counseled him that way. But certainly he had probably said a lot of these things similar to them. And the other thing I thought of is just how this parallels the prayer that Yeshua teaches us to pray. You start off with praise and lauding Yahweh, and then talking about our sin and how we're to deal with our sin and so on and so forth. But anyway, I just thought it was important that this is Moshe's song. It probably should also be our song, since he spoke it to the people of Israel.
Yeah, it's interesting, the song of Moshe. To my knowledge, it occurs 3 times. Once right after the Red Sea crossing, and then you have this one, then you have in Revelation. My question, I think it came up a couple days ago too. I said, I'm really curious to see, which one they're going to sing in Revelation. It doesn't give the lyrics, it just says they're going to sing it. So I don't know if it's both or not, or now we have Kevin and then we have Tim. I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't wiggle my hand hard enough. I did see you. Thank you, you guys. Double your pay helping,
Amazing Torah portion. As we look to Yahweh redeeming the land and redeeming Israel, his people. So in chapter 32 of Deuteronomy, in verse 43, he says that he will atone or cleanse his people's land. And that's where it's Kippur right there. And in the prophet Isaiah, chapter 4, verse 3, he says, and he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem. And the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and by a spirit of burning. Then the Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For over all the glory there will be a canopy. And then in the prophet Zechariah, chapter 3, verse 9, he declares, I will remove the iniquity of the land in a single day. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, every one of you will invite his neighbor to come under his vine and under his fig tree, which is an interesting transition to Sukkot. But it's amazing. The words that we read and heard this morning, the Song of Moses, they're horrible words, some of the words. And yet in them, like, was said, there's the promise of redemption, and he will bring it to pass. Thank God. And thank God for sending his son Yeshua, who is the one who has atoned for our sins. And then ultimately, he will again, one day, he will cleanse the land and he will restore his people. And then all Israel will be saved.
I agree. Yeah, Tim.
I want to point people to one of the things I've noticed recently is that a lot of people think that calling the Lord or Yahweh Father is a New Testament thing. But
Calling what?
calling the Lord Father or saying Father is a New Testament thing. It's here in the Song of Moses. It says in verse 6, 32 verse 6, it says, do you not deal thus with the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father who brought you? Has he not made you and established you? So when Yeshua is speaking his famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer, it's our Father in heaven. So everyone knew what he was talking about. And it's interesting that Yeshua's mission, it wasn't to point to himself. It was to point to the Father always. And that's something that I've been learning. It's like, okay, what does that look like? Well, here Yeshua might be testifying to this passage here because he's a living word. And so he's always pointing to the Father. Well, what does he say? In John, he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And so it's interesting to point that out and connect it here. And I would encourage people to do a word study of every time the Father shows up in all the Gospels. It shows up quite a few times, especially in John. It's like over 100 times or something like that. But Yeshua is always pointing to the Father.
That was verse 6?
Deuteronomy 32, verse 6. It's in a few other places too. Like 18 says, of the rock who begot you, you're unmindful and have forgotten the God who fathered you. So there you have God and then Father.
Okay.
So both of those are in there too.
Way cool. I missed both of those. Thank you. It just type of thing. But you're right. That does tie in very well together. And what everyone is saying right now is extremely good. No pressure on anybody who speaks afterwards. It's okay. It's okay. Give it your best shot. It's okay, But seriously, I'm really impressed, all of you. Yes, sir.
So, I'm consistently the rock.
Yes.
Rock.
Yes.
Okay, the rock, eben, the Hebrew word for stone, something solid, foundational. What is the foundation of our faith is Yeshua only. And I'm especially in this passage where we have both the example of Yahusha and someone that is not Yahusha, but more than likely calls themselves Yahusha. And this is so important to me because the enemy has such an ability to be able to hide the nature of the anti-Messiah, just tweaking small things where you just look at it and say, wow, this is Messiah right here. Well, we're warned, especially in Revelation, about looking here and there as to, oh, the Messiah is here, the Messiah is there. But he's the cornerstone. Yahusha is the cornerstone, the very thing that holds together all of what's in this book, from the first letter of the word all the way down to the end letter. It all expresses his grace and love. And like Tim was saying about everything points back to the Father, well, that's Yahusha and Yahuwah are one. They are the Father, they are the Son. And I can't help but to think that unless we pattern ourselves after the stone first, we will always be washed away by any kind of problems that end up coming up in life and get very wishy-washy, very much easily swept.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent points. Very good. You touched a little bit, I was highlighting, is there more than one rock in this passage? If so, who or what are they? I gave you a hint, look, verses 31 and 37. I frankly did not notice that in the Song of Moshe at all the times I've read it until I read it yesterday, because yesterday's the day I try to answer all the questions so it's fresh in my mind. I went, oh man, how did I, who put that in my Bible? But yeah, there are other rocks. There are other rocks. You got to be on the right one. What did Yeshua say? Build your house on rock, not sand, or the rocks can fracture and break apart. His won't. If you look at Daniel with the statue, I think it's verse 2, it says mountain, but that mountain's made out of rock. I mean, you can kind of tell it's a big rock. And it just grows, takes over the whole thing. And all of the best that the demons can do and humans can do all shatters once it just hits and stumbles, really, on that rock, on that mountain, on that rock. Yeah, they're toast. Yes, sir.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned the R word, revelation.
Mentioned what?
You mentioned the R word, revelation. So I'm not going to make any commentary. I will, however, raise a question that I think is really fun to look into, which is, why does the Song of Moshe appear in Revelation? Mm-hmm. And why is that the specific thing that we should be singing? That's it.
Good question. Very good question. I'd have to go back to read it again to remember the context of it. It was in heaven, if I remember right. It wasn't here on earth, it was in heaven. And there is a reason for it. It was funny because Michael was asking me something before service started, and I said, hang on, it's taking me a minute to access that, find that file and access it on my hard drive. So I know it's tucked in there, but I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add something about the stone, the ebon. And 2 days ago, I was doing a deeper search for certain words. Mm-hmm. And yeah, one of them was the stone. And I heard this teaching a while back, a few months ago, and it was spoken about us being small, tiny stones, and every stone is important to hold up the whole structure. And tiny stones are pretty solid and strong. If you're a body of believers, if we're all like-minded. And then also, Yeshua is the stone or the rock. Mm-hmm. He's holy, and he attaches, this is what I thought was interesting. He's holy, and he attaches himself to the rest of us, because when he's alone and not with the other stones, he sits there and he's kadosh. But when he is with the rest of us, he wraps himself over us with his love. And I know altar came, because an altar of stone can come on that, and sacrifices are made on altars, the blood of rams, bulls, and goats. So he wrapped his love around us, and his blood covered us. Mm-hmm. And then obedience is better than sacrifice, and he connects obedience with the altar. He's the altar. He laid himself down on top of us. We no longer, the altar used to have blood, but it needs the sacrifice of his praise. It needs the sacrifice of our praise. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting, that we're all tiny stones. Joining with him, he wraps himself around us, because he is the rock that is without sin. And his ways are perfect, just like it said in Deuteronomy. So there's just so many connections to this. Mm-hmm. And so I really thought that was really interesting. Would it be too early if because on the same piece of paper, I mean, my son was just, he thought, wow, that sounded like he did a deep study. Would it be too early if I say something about the former and latter rain that I learned in this teaching? Or
no, you can, because it's in there. It's in the, and that's fine. These are the rest of the questions I had for the Torah. And
but you probably want to cover some in...
No, it's some right here. It's okay. It's okay. Here it is. In Joel, verse 23 mentions the early and latter rains. What are those, as in how do they manifest in life?
Okay, well, I'm going to start at the beginning.
Okay.
Okay.
And these pictures is basically a plea to return to Yahweh. So when you're separate from Yahweh, that's really what we kind of look like.
Oh, that
We're
we're
off a
hanging on
cliff.
him.
We're barely hanging on to a branch that's probably going to break any moment. And when it does, you're going to die.
Yeah, that's why we need that solid rock
That's
under
why
our
we
feet.
need
Yeah.
the rock, the hand of Yah to catch us. And then hopefully we are repentant.
Okay,
And we
so
stay repentant if you accept his love and his forgiveness. Because in the unforgiving servant story, he accepted it, but then I don't know the best way to put it, but he messed up. He accepted it,
okay, so
but he didn't turn and do what he should have done. It didn't go very deep, I think, is what I suspect.
okay, so the significance of the former rain.
Yeah.
It's in the Strong's Concordance 4175. Former rain means teacher, archer, and I learned a while back, ever before I heard about the former and latter rains, in my Hebrew, that teacher means more. And another Strong's number, 3384, is for former rain, and an offshoot, well, I think that it's either Geshem or Geshum for rain, but this one is called Yara. Means to cast, to throw, teach, shoot, instruct, point out, or archers. Teacher, rain laid direct, a bow that misses the mark, inform, and direct. And he rains his word on us to instruct us. And teacher can also mean, this is really interesting, is a rich great man that is highly generous, also has a great rich name, describes Yeshua, who teaches you his word, and he will rain on your thirsty soul. So we need rain and water to live in ancient Israel. So besides just reading in the English, when you're waiting for the wheat to grow and be aviv, that's in the fall. And so you need that former rain, to water and to grow, because so much agriculture was taking place here. So in Joel 2:23 says, Yahweh your Elohim has given the people of Zion the autumn rains in righteousness and sent his abundant showers. Both autumn and spring rains as before. Rejoice in the Lord. He causes you to have rain. So that's a blessing from the Lord. It's like a gift to have the rains fall down on our crops so that we can, produce a crop of abundant bounty. And so another thing for Yara, when it's written in the Hebrew, Yod Resh Hey. And so when you put a Tav in front of it and you change the Yod and replace it with a Vav to spell Torah, because Torah is another offshoot. And so what I did is I wrote the Tav, Vav, Resh, and the Hey, and then the numerical value. So the Tav means cross, sign, covenant, numerical value of 400. The Vav is a nail, has a numerical value of 6. Resh, the head of house, highest person, 200. And the Hey means a window or revealed, and has 5. And then here's something that in the end that was really interesting. I had to copy this on this one sheet of paper from different sheets of paper.
If you could wrap it up, though, that would be good.
Okay, so So one more thing. It added up to 611, and then, I thought there was 613. So what it is, it became too short, and so he asked Yeshua, he says, my Talmudim, you forget the second greatest commandment. So Matthew 22:37-40, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. So all these commandments added up together is 613. So the former rain is the first coming, the latter rain is the second coming. Yeshua is the Torah who became flesh and dwelt among us. And the Torah means the sign of the covenant, cross of the nail, is the head of the house revealed. And then if you say it backwards, I like it better. Revealed is the head of the house, a nail, and the sign of the covenant of the cross.
We need to
So
wrap it up.
Torah is all about salvation from Yeshua.
Yeah.
So he connects his word to rain and also a tree. He's
Okay.
a tree of life.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's edifying, and yet you need to shorten it down just for this formatting. Yeah. Plus, I try to keep everything that I share from myself in my own study. A few times I will share what other people write, but most of the time I don't, because I want to be, I do it personally, study what they say, but I try to go back and prove it or show how it works for myself too. That helps. Yes, sir.
I'd like to answer one of the questions of how that pertains to us today, in my point of view.
Which part did you want to do that on?
This Torah portion.
Sure, I'll go back there.
But I'm going to go back to one of our recent readings. It's Deuteronomy 29, 14, and 15.
Oh, okay.
But you are not the only ones with whom I am making this covenant with its curses. I am making this covenant both with you who stand here today in the presence of the Lord our God, and also with future generations who are not standing here today.
Yes.
I got in an argument with somebody the other day, which is easy to do, that this only pertained to Israel,
Yeah.
the one nation under God. And I had to disagree and said, we are those descendants. We are living through this right now, and that's possibly the reason I see for Moshe, the Song of Moshe, being in Revelation. We're coming back to it. And it's a reminder. So to me, that was a strong reminder and a strong, yes, it does pertain to us today, directly. So, yeah, that's what I came up with on that. And
Yeah. Well, good job doing that. Yeah, I encourage you to do that because it is a challenge. It is a bit of a challenge. A lot of times you'll think, what has this got to do with me today? That was way back then or something, or somebody else. But if you read through, the classic example is right on this podium, but Paul talking about that. But it's many, many places throughout the whole scripture that we are joined into them and we get to partake of those covenants, okay? Whether you're DNA or if you're not and you're adopted in, then you're a wild branch, okay? Otherwise, you're a natural branch. But they're both branches on the same tree trunk. There's not two trees. There's not a major offshoot of the tree this way and one this way, okay? It doesn't work that way. A classic example is Ezekiel 37 with the two sticks. Classic example also. So good job. Way to go. Yes?
I think the words are out of my mouth, David.
No.
Two sticks. Two sticks can one, man.
Well,
Come
Jill,
on.
I need a napkin. My hands are gooey.
No, as soon as Jenny was talking about going about the stone, I went, oh my gosh, I totally spaced. And this is how Yah works. He's just absolutely amazing and bringing back things that you think that you forgot. One of the most important aspects, I think, with Yahusha being the stone, that I think is, at least in my mind, probably one of his most important aspects, is that he's a stumbling stone. He causes us to stumble.
Yeah, I noticed that.
When we do the things that we're not supposed to do, or when we're coming up to a point where we're about ready to come running smack head into a brick wall or something.
Yeah,
He's preventing us from getting further damage by letting us break our arm first. It gets me thinking about what other types of stones that are present throughout Scripture and their function. I think of things like the millstone. Well, what does the millstone do? It grinds the grains, the flour, into flours, which creates sustenance for us to be able to take in. Well, the sustenance is that bread, which again is Yahusha. Anyway,
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. I'm going to make just a couple of quick points, and then we'll go back to anybody who wants, and then I want to try to, it's 11, a little after 11 an hour. I want us to get to the gospel section today because I feel an unction in my spirit that we should. Okay. Yeah. Did you want? No? You want to hold? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. The pattern that I saw in the three, especially if you just read those subject title things, is basically return to Yahweh and Yahweh's love. That's the solution. That's the good news at the end. But return, return, return. He will accept you. I know it's a lie that people are told that, oh, I'm so bad I could never be forgiven. I'm sorry, with respect, I would challenge that. Okay. The other one is when we're talking about the latter rain, Peter quotes this in Acts. Okay, so it's very clear that and they are an agricultural community, heavily dependent on agriculture, right? 97% or something agriculture. So agriculture, you do need the rains. You need all the rains or you start having difficulties. In fact, if you don't get them, you'll be in a drought. And that's really bad news. So there is a practicalness to it. But as it was brought up, and in a couple more spots here, it's also talking about the Lord and his Spirit and the blessings and et cetera that come down. So it's a double meaning. It's practical because God does care about our practical needs. He set up the system, okay? But also it's the spiritual part, and that's very important. And Peter was clearly quoting this whole section of Joel, and is right out of it. And so I think that's important for us to pay attention to as well. And that was in Acts chapter 2, by the way, when Peter does that. It's verses 14 through basically 21, but he's directly quoting from here. And so I think that's important. Okay. I had never really had it pointed out to me till, we were living in northern Idaho, and we were up there, and somebody came up and says, well, what do you think about the latter rain thing? What do you think it is? I said, the what? It's one of the things I was reading through the Bible, just skipped over it, didn't pay much attention to it. And now I realize how important it is. It's really, really important. So, okay, on the gospel section, and by the way, I use this because it's showing you how Israel is the nation that's supposed to be the light to the world by being the firstborn. And who can't like a young baby like that? I mean, I'm sorry, you're just going to like that picture. And I explained these, okay? And then we have the parable of the unforgiving servant. You've got the story of him here before the sovereign. Then this is what he does when he's been rewarded, and now it comes back on him and he's hauled back in. Okay? So the parable of the unforgiving servant. The parable of the unforgiving servant is an amazing story of high moral behavior. What was the good and the bad news of his story for this servant? Who is the sovereign in this story? What did the servant do right? Because he did do some things right. And what did he do wrong? And how is the moral of this story reflected in the Lord's Prayer? Anybody got any fun ones on that one? Pat, yeah. Pat, I hate to say this, but you're becoming our gospel scholar. It's fun. I think it's neat because you have many people do, and yet you jump there a lot, and I think it's neat that you go right to the gospel and get good truth.
Okay, the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Yep.
So here in Matthew 18, verse 33, the Master says, should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you?
Yep, you nailed it. And other times, depending on which translation, it'll actually use the word debtor. And this is totally a debtor, you know. Yeah, it ties right into the Lord's Prayer. Hi. So this is a very important story. Thank you, Pat. Anybody? And I always like to talk about the gospel, but gospel can also be, in English, said good news, right? And if you have good news, that means you have bad news. So that's why he did good and bad here. There was good news and there was bad news. The problem is he had the good news first, then the bad news. If I have to have both, I'd rather have them the other way around. Like the son in the parable, the Lord said, go out and work on my field. He says, no, I'm not going to do it. But then he repented and went out and did the work. The other one did it the other way around. Oh, sure, Dad, no problem. Then he went out and messed up and didn't do it. Anybody else on this section? In verse 18, and again, we're in Matthew chapter 18. And then the servant fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I shall pay you all, which is a good thing. That is a good thing. He knew he needed the mercy. Okay? and he knew that he needed patience, and that he knew the right process was then to, if he gets that grace, he gets that mercy, to then use it to do a good thing by paying off the debt. Not just skipping free and running to another land and never doing it. He didn't do that. And the master of that servant, who was the sovereign, was moved with compassion, released him and forgave him that debt. To me, the sovereign is the Lord. No question about it. So if you go with him, we can also count on him to have compassion, release us. And he forgave him the debt. He didn't even make him pay it back. He was willing to. I really think he was willing to. But he forgave him that debt. You know, it reminds me of this, not a parable, but a story of the lepers that were all healed. One went back and thanked him. There's a couple other times, I'm trying to remember where they are, where someone was healed in the temple area, and they immediately got and went into the temple. And you know they were going in there to worship. Another time someone was healed, they immediately got up and started serving. That's who I want to be. That's who I want to be. But this story seems to be a little bit different. And we've got a mic there, and then Tim, I saw you faster this time.
Tim, you want to go ahead there, bud? Okay, all right. So I want to touch a little bit more on the end of this parable, which is, I think, probably one of the more key aspects for me to pay attention to, and I think a lot of people should. In verse 34 of Matthew 18, and his master was wroth and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. So also my heavenly Father shall do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. Isn't it interesting that he still had to pay that debt, whether it was with his pound of flesh or not? It would have been a lot better if he'd have been able to just be a bit more humble and do it over time, but he still ended up having to pay it over time. The point is that eventually it doesn't matter if you do it out of the willingness of your heart or not. Yah's going to get his, period. He's going to have you pay for what you do, either in righteousness or in unrighteousness. There are consequences to choices, either blessing or curses. Choose this day, which you will do. Right there, that is such a huge blaring neon sign for me. If that isn't an endorsement to choose to do the right thing, I don't really know what else is.
I hear you. I mean, it's kind of like, in our heart, what's our heart like? Well, left to itself, it's not good, so we need a new heart from the Lord, stuff like that. But, in a new heart, I think you want to do things to help other people, love your neighbor and love God, In this story, okay, so let's say, you kind of blow through those. Look, at least figure out that if you want to love yourself, at least, which is somewhat selfish, but not completely, because you need to take care of yourself, but you can go too much. At least do it for yourself. You don't have to be, more of a saintly person by taking on loving God and loving it. At least do it for yourself. It's common sense you should not do some of these things because it's going to come back on you. I think that's why that concept is fairly prevalent in different cultures around the world, because they all understand the concept. You reap what you sow. They call it different things, but you reap what you sow on that, and you really, you need to be careful, at least for your own sake, if not for somebody else's, which is, again, a higher moral level of behavior, I believe. It's very good, very good. And I had some scriptures for why I believe Yeshua is the sovereign. I didn't write down I didn't list out all the verses, but again, I'll list them out. I'll say them out here so if you want to go back over the video on YouTube, you can flag them. But before I do that, thank you. I forgot, Tim, my bad.
I was going to say, in my walk with the Lord, one of the most powerful things has been forgiveness. And unforgiveness will bound you to the past, and it'll be like swallowing a pill, and it's like cancer and gangrene in that it eats away at your soul. And for a long time, I misunderstood forgiveness in that I thought the person had to come to me and ask for forgiveness. No, it's something you do completely on your own. It's not something that the person, it's nice if they do. And I heard a phrase a while ago, and it's hurt people hurt people. So everyone's hurt in this world because of sin, and so they'll hurt others. And so no matter what, almost guarantee, you're going to run into someone who hurts you, and a lot of times it's in our past. And if you don't let that go, then you'll be bound to that, and it'll follow you the rest of your life, something that you can never quite shake. And then a lot of times I used to think that you got to feel right to forgive someone, but it turns out it's just a decision. You decide to do it, and you acknowledge what they've done, and then you just walk through that again and again as it comes up, and then eventually it won't come up anymore, and you're able to have a conversation with them. And a lot of times I've seen it bind a lot of things in my life and other people's lives, but then once you get that, you're free, and then you're able to love people freely, and it blocks love, and it blocks so much things in your life if you have unforgiveness. And we're coming up on Yom Kippur, and there's a lot of stuff people can have resentment and stuff stewing, so I would just encourage people to let that go.
Yeah, let it go and let God is a very good expression. Let it go. Let it go. Thank you, Linda, for pointing out Tim again. That's right there. We have another point out. Okay, yeah, Paul, and then I'll get these in. We're doing good on time. So.
Yeah, when you were commenting about the people who went directly into the temple versus the people who went and began serving.
Well, there's two examples of when people got healed. It seemed to me they were grateful to God, so they immediately started doing godly things. Love God or love your neighbor.
My point is that what I've learned the hard way, or one of the things I've learned the hard way, is it is perfectly acceptable to worship Yahweh by serving.
Oh, yeah.
And I would take it a step further, and those of us that are blessed with a godly woman, it's okay to serve Yahweh by serving her. And you will be blessed in ways that you can't even comprehend before you start doing that. If you realize that's okay. You don't have to be the big, tough, in charge and all the stuff that we have in this culture that we need to be.
Yeah.
All the time. There are times to do that, but there are times when it's okay to serve our God by serving her and by serving other people like they were when they went to service instead of into the temple. I don't know that they were worshiping less. I think maybe they were doing it in a more mature way.
Yeah. Yeah, and Paul, it's a good point. I believe one of them was right outside the temple when he got healed. I believe another one was in a home, and they got right up, and there were guests, and there were people there, so they got up. I think that's why, Paul. I agree with you. One of the good ways to show God's love, to worship him, is to serve other people. Yeshua, when he washed their feet, classic example. Quite a few other places as well, too. Yeah, if you can go into the temple and worship him, great, but if not, look around for a way to love your neighbor. I mean, this Good Samaritan was worshiping God. I think that's why he said he was a Samaritan, because they were spiritual outcasts from the Jews. So he picked somebody who was there to say, look, he's actually doing Torah here. Why aren't you? And that's, yeah, I agree with you. Okay, let me get these sovereign ones in. Yeshua, who is the sovereign? Yeshua, as he will judge all, which is what this person did in here. You've got John chapter 5, twice in verse 22 and 27. And then you have Acts 10:42, and again in Acts 17:30 and 31. And I have two more, 2 Corinthians 5:10, and then Revelation 19:11. So you have John 5:22, 5:27, Acts 10:42, Acts 17:30 to 31, 2 Corinthians 5:10, and Revelation 19:11. Okay? Those are just a few. There's obviously a gazillion more, but I tried to pick some that were, you could see how they are there in different books. I mean, you've got Yochanan writing two of those, you've got Luke writing one, and you've got Paul writing one. They're in agreement, okay? Some of those are direct quotes of Yeshua, and the other ones are describing him. So he's the judge. He's the one that decides these things. All of that has been given to him by the Father. So, and in Song of Moshe, so Tim has one reference to the gospel message, which is also good news, okay, was the Father, okay, and that is a direct correlation. You have the rock. You also have the vines of Sodom and Gomorrah. What was their fruit? It was gall, right? Yeshua, I am the vine. That is a direct reference to that. Okay. There's many of these. When I was doing some of the research on this, I'll wrap up with this one, see if I can find it. I was doing the Haftarah section. That's what's fun with these sometimes. And I think it was in Hosea, that I was doing some research on the Hosea part, and one of the references took me over to Ezekiel 34:23. And this is a good news. It's not technically in the Torah, but it is in the Tanakh. I will establish one shepherd over them. This is Ezekiel, okay? This is way after everything's hit the fan and it's a disaster, okay? If I remember right, Ezekiel was in Babylon, right? Yeah, right. So that means they're in the Babylonian captivity. This is disaster, okay? I will establish one shepherd over them, and he shall feed them, my servant David, and he shall feed them and be their shepherd. And this is directly related to, I believe, why Yeshua said in John 10:11 through 13, I am the good shepherd. He's that shepherd that was prophesied. That's part of the good news. So technically it's not in the Torah, but it's in the Tanakh. More good news. So when I'm the vine, Torah. I'm the rock, Torah. Peter says, that rock that he had was actually the faith that he declared Yeshua was the Son of God. That's what was the rock, was that faith. And then now you have him as the good shepherd. So when these things pop up, like Tim said, in the New Testament, Brit Hadashah, Messianic Scriptures, which I heard another phrase, I forget what it is now. But anyway, these aren't new concepts. Most of them are ones that have been done before, and they're being identified with Yeshua, so yeah, he's the one. He's the one. That's why when they got so excited about him at the beginning, when a lot of disciples got called, they finally had been waiting. Because Messiah fever had been going on in Israel for over 100 years at this time. They were popping up everywhere. And people were really looking. The Essenes were looking out in Qumran. Everybody was looking, So when Yeshua popped up, it's like, well, I don't know. But then they saw the proofs. And that's why when John the Baptist saw them yoking on the immerser, he said, nope, yeah, he's the one, go. And that's why they did that.